Yes, my name's Lee Weatherby. I'm Vice President with Turner Drake and Partners in Halifax. We're a valuation and consulting company. I've been involved in the real estate business for over 35 years with Turner Drake. Turner Drake has been in business for over 40 years. Our specialty is in the valuation of real estate. My own background focuses more on expropriation work and land valuations, and I have been involved on many occasions with specific claims for various First Nations throughout New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. But I was retained in this particular file by Buttonkeg to provide an estimate of the compensation for the acquisition of lands for this highway project. And I've been involved on this project now since 2013, attending the interchange working group meetings with transportation and with chief and councillors throughout 2014 and 15 and 2016. At the end of which I prepared a comprehensive valuation report which documented all of the research and conclusions regarding compensation. The document is over 150 pages long. I also produced an executive summary of that report for INAC. What I propose to do right now is to talk through the main report. I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation of the key points from the valuation report. So I will go through that slide by slide and talk through what I think are the critical components of the claim. So this is talking through what we call the master valuation report, which documents all of the work that was done to come up with the compensation amount. And there are two distinct areas of land. The first one is around the land around the main reserve, and the lands which are shown edged in red lines here are the reserve lands and lands which are owned in trust for the band. And the lands which are coloured in purple and in orange are the lands which are being acquired for this highway construction programme. There are some other lands which are shaded in green here, just smaller pieces, which are privately owned lands. So to orient ourselves with this plan and the various colours, in purple, coloured in purple, are the lands which will be acquired for highway construction from what we call the fee simple lands, the lands which are held in trust for the band, and the various orange strips and parcels are lands which are being acquired from the reserve proper. That's part of IR number 34. And there is also a small acquisition of land from the reserve lands which sit separately close to Heatherton, and this is just for the road widening, and there are two small parcels close to the main Trans-Canada Highway. This is the cover page of the report itself, and you can see that the report was prepared for the Put-and-Keg Mi'kmaq Nation, which is our client for this report, and the date of the valuation, the effective date, is July of 2016. The actual valuation went over a period of 2 or 3 years, and the report was finally issued in mid to late 2016. This is the covering page from the beginning of the report, and I don't propose to go through each and every page of the report, but I will just go through the key pages, and you can see the report is addressed to Chief P.J. Prosper. An important component here is what we call the intended users of the report, and because the report was done for the purpose of a tripartite agreement between the provincial and federal government and the band, we have to specify that these various parties are entitled to rely on the report. So Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal and Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada are also entitled to rely on the results of this report. And at the end of this introductory page of the report is a summary of the compensation, and you can see a table here which summarises the compensation that we consider is the appropriate amount to be paid. And this is a larger version of that table. So this is a summary of the compensation in total and the various components of how it breaks down. And I will be going in some detail of these various components. The component column deals with various parts of the land. There is a distinction made between the highway land, which is the purple land on the plans, and is the orange part on the land, the highway land, which is acquired from the reserve proper, and there is the separate market value for the fee simple lands, which were coloured in purple on the plans. And you can see over to the right the number of acres that were taken from each of those components, and the compensation for the land component that was taken. The next component deals with replacement cost of homes. There are 7 homes which had to be removed, or which will have to be removed for the highway construction. There's a separate line for that. There are separate components for the value of improvements, site improvements on the land, which is a relatively small component. There is a component called injurious affection, which is calculated separately, and there is a small amount for what we call disturbance, which is for moving costs. Now, all of these compensation categories are what we call statutory heads of claim under the Nova Scotia Expropriation Act. And so the total compensation, which is in the bottom right corner of $2,372,800, is the sum of all of these various statutory heads of claim which the Expropriation Act provides for. So basically we've treated this as though it were an expropriation, even though it is an actual transfer of lands between one party and the government, but we deal with it as though it were an expropriation under the Expropriation Act. What this table shows is basically an inventory of all of the land which currently exists on reserve and the proportion that will be taken for this highway project. And this is broken down basically into 2 columns, what we call the parent parcels, which are all of the various individual parcels which make up the reserve, and in total there are over 700 acres. We estimate around 713 acres in total of reserve and fee simple lands. And the columns over here provide an inventory of the lands which are going to be acquired for the highway project. There are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, a total of 17 individual parcels which will be acquired, totaling 67 acres. So there's approximately 9% of the total land inventory of the reserve is being acquired and used for this highway and interchange project. What this table also shows over towards the right are the civic addresses of the 7 homes which will have to be relocated because they sit within the what will be the new highway alignment and interchange. So the civic addresses of those are shown on this inventory table. We then have a series of 5 plans which show in greater detail where these lands will be acquired from and what's included and contained within those parcels. And again, the colouring system stays the same, so the purple shaded parcels here would be part of the fee simple lands, which are held in trust for the band, and the yellow or orange colour shaded parcels will be part of the reserve proper. These plans also show the existing alignment of the Trans-Canada Highway, and they also show the future construction of the interchange and the overpass and the on and off ramps to the new interchange. These plans also show the impact on the reserve lands immediately next to this construction work. So we have homes which are both within and just outside of where these new boundaries will be situated, and you can see that those which fall within the shaded areas are the homes which will have to be relocated, and those which are outside will still remain. So this plan is at the western end of the reserve, and next to Sagamore Road. And the next plan shows the central part of the land, again the interchange, and moving eastward to where Afton Road comes close to the Trans-Canada Highway, and again it shows the houses which are going to be impacted by the acquisition. And this plan is of the same area, showing the Afton Road where it crosses over the existing Trans-Canada Highway, and several homes here which fall within what will be the new highway widening alignment, and the homes which fall just outside of the new alignment, and this is in the area of the Beto Loop development. And then at the northern end of Afton Road, where it meets trunk number 4, the land acquisition here will be for the connector road between trunk 4 and the new highway. And there are 2 homes which are in the vicinity here, one of which lies squarely within the land to be acquired, and one which sits just outside. And again, this shows from a different perspective the land which will be taken at this interchange of trunk number 4 and Afton Road for the intersection improvements. I think it's important that I give an overview of the compensation principles and a general overview of the claim and how we proceeded to put together our compensation estimate. And as I said before, the compensation has been calculated under the Nova Scotia Expropriation Act, and the various heads of claim, statutory heads of claim, which are specifically written into that act are market value, or alternatively a home for a home compensation, and I'll speak about that because it does have some relevance here. Secondly, injurious affection. Thirdly, what's called disturbance, and fourthly, what's called special economic advantage. And we'll be looking at each of those compensation heads of claim in turn. The only one which does not apply in this case is special economic advantage, because there is no legitimate claim for that in this particular case. In terms of market value, there is a standard definition of market value which presumes a willing seller and a willing buyer, and it's intended to be the price at which real estate will transact in an open market. And it presumes normally a fee simple interest in land. The land which we're dealing with here is reserve land for the most part, which does not trade in the open market. So we have to make some assumptions and basically presume that the land would be available to be sold in the open market, and what would its value be if that were the case. So we adopt open market conditions for the purpose of establishing market value figures for compensation purposes. Another important component here is that the underlying scheme for which these lands are being acquired have to be disregarded for compensation purposes. So in the future, once the interchange has been constructed and the lands are suitable for commercial or other types of development, there will be an enhanced value in these lands. They are not part of the compensation. The band and all surrounding landowners will benefit from that in the future, but for the purpose of establishing compensation under the Expropriation Act, that's not to be taken into consideration. The largest component of the compensation, the largest part of the $2.3 million figure, is what's called the home for a home component. And this has to do entirely with the 7 homes which will have to be relocated because they lie within the new highway alignment. And what the Expropriation Act says about the home for a home provisions is essentially that where a family home is being taken for a particular purpose, and the amount of compensation should be sufficient for the owner to purchase or construct a home which is reasonably equivalent to that which was expropriated. So it's not necessarily restricted to the market value of the home. There is a safety net there for the property owner that the compensation is sufficient to put them in the same position that they were beforehand. And so the test that we've applied here is to say, is it possible to acquire reasonably equivalent homes in the area? And the fact is that homes on reserve simply do not trade in the open market, so the opportunity to replace them as conventional homeowners might by going to the market and buying another home, that simply is not available in this situation. The question then is, well, could equivalent homes be acquired off reserve, which would be considered reasonably equivalent? And in our view, that's not a reasonable approach to take either, because these lands are on reserve, and there are benefits to homeowners living on reserve, which homes off reserve simply would not be able to duplicate. And so we would not consider off-reserve housing to be reasonably equivalent within what the Act requires. So if reasonably equivalent homes cannot be bought in the marketplace, then the fallback position is to provide sufficient compensation to provide for the construction of new homes. And so that's the basis on which we've approached this component of the claim. So essentially we've calculated the replacement cost of each of those 7 homes and included that as a component of the compensation. And that, as I said, is the largest part of the total compensation package here. The next component of the compensation has to do with injurious affection. Essentially, injurious affection in this context has to do with the reduced value of property which lies outside of the highway acquisition. And it's common in all partial taking cases where part of the land is being taken and part of it remains, particularly when there are homes in the vicinity which are going to be left so close to the new highway boundary that their values are going to be reduced because of that. And we've identified a total of 4 homes which are sufficiently close to the new boundary that their values will be impacted, and that really is the essence of the injurious affection component of this compensation package. There are other smaller components of the injurious affection claim which have to do with remnant parts of land which are left over because of the irregular configuration of the new highway boundaries. So all of those become components of the injurious affection claim. The final head of compensation which we've dealt with is called disturbance, and there is a definition of disturbance in the Expropriation Act. It's essentially related to the cost of moving house. So again, it relates to the 7 homes which have to be relocated, and has to do with the cost of moving from one home to the new home. And the report is required to give a breakdown of the total compensation, so it's not adequate in this particular case for us to provide just a single compensation number. The various parties require that the market value of the land be distinguished between the reserve land and the fee simple land, and they also require that the various components of home for a home and the injurious affection and the disturbance components be calculated and presented separately. Once we start getting into the details of the claim, there are basically 3 pinch points on the land where homes are being impacted. And you can see on this plan specifically how the lands are being affected. So, and this is in the Sycamore Road area, and again you can see the lands which are being acquired are shaded in purple and in orange. You can see very clearly the houses which fall within or partially within the highway alignment. They would fall within the home for a home category, and there are homes which are so close to the boundary that they will suffer injurious affection. One is number 123 and the other one is number 161. The one that falls just outside is number 173, which is also fairly close to the new boundary, but there are some steep slopes in the backyard there which will offset any real negative impact of the new boundary in its proximity to the house. The complexity of the valuation and the need to break out the compensation between its various components is probably best illustrated by number 153, where the house sits partially within the highway boundary, so it's a home for a home claim, but part of the land shaded purple is within the fee simple lands, and part of it sits within the reserve land proper. There is also the white area remaining which will not be acquired and which will remain with the band, but it has no subsequent value. It's too small to build on. And so there's an element of injurious affection to this component of the land. Now what we've created here, because the reserve is not subdivided into building lots in the conventional sense, we've looked at what land would be required to support each of these individual homes and created simulated lot boundaries that would meet current day regulations and meet market expectations for lot sizes and dimensions. So we've created individual lot boundaries for each of the homes. We've also looked at the land in between the various homes which has not yet been developed but which has road frontage and could potentially be building lots at some time in the future. And this is important for valuation purposes because it helps us to isolate values for building lots as distinct from just general acreage lands which have no genuine development potential in the immediate future. So by doing this we can isolate and pinpoint values for specific parts of the land which are affected by the acquisition. This is the second pinch point, and this is at Afton Road where it meets trunk number 4. And again we've shown the houses which are either within or just outside the new highway or road boundaries. And we've also identified here 3 potential building lots which lie within the new road corridor, which could potentially have supported buildings that could have been developed as building lots in the past. So there are individual values calculated for these 3 building lots, in addition to the home for a home compensation for the house itself.